This report launch is a first in the history of HRNK, a history that goes back to 2001. Hello, I am Greg Scarlatoiu, the executive director of the Washington, D.C. based U.S. Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, HRNK. It is a first because Raymond, my colleague, is in Seoul, South Korea. Hyunseung, my colleague, is in Washington, D.C., and I am in Bucharest, Romania. We've never run a program from Washington, Bucharest, and Seoul. We look forward to a good program and a good conversation. Let me begin by introducing my colleagues. Raymond is Director of Operations and Research for HRNK. Raymond has been a terrific member of HRNK's team since 2014. He was a full-time staff member. Then he went to complete his studies, or rather pursue further studies, returned to HRNK after being a consultant as full-time staff member. He hails from Princeton and Stanford. Hyunseung is a North Korea analyst born and raised in North Korea. He hails from the Pyongyang University of Foreign Studies. He also completed his studies in China. Both Raymond and Hyunseung have been absolutely critical to this project. Raymond and I have conducted interview with North Korean escapees who've conducted multiple interviews, more than 30 of them. Hyunseung has been extraordinarily helpful in enabling us to understand the chain of command and control that governs the dispatch of North Korean workers overseas. This is the topic we are addressing today. To make a very long story short, yesterday, North Korea launched another missile. This year, North Korea has launched 19 missiles. The nuclear program continues. The missile program continues. There's a machinery that fuels North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear programs. And this process of officially dispatching North Korean workers overseas is a central part of the procurement machinery that produces hard currency for the North Korean regime. Of course, this hard currency is also meant to keep the elites happy, as Hyunseung knows, through access, through luxury goods and hard currency from the outside world. This is an issue that HRNK has followed for many years. We have conducted terrific interviews, and the report that we have just published could have been much longer. And moving forward, I hope that we will focus on conditions of work, the labor conditions surrounding the dispatch of North Korean workers overseas. That said, the point of this endeavor has been to, of course, highlight the process, the conditions of work, and especially the chain of command and control governing the dispatch of North Korean workers overseas. So, of course, right now, due to UN Security Council resolutions, the dispatch and the hosting of North Korean workers is banned. To put it very simply, the findings of this report indicate that our target countries, China and Russia, have continued to host North Korean workers in direct violations of UN Security Council sanctions. A very brief comment on working conditions. The working conditions, and we're not the only organization that has reported on this, there are many others. But of course, the working conditions range from terrible to appalling, absolutely awful. All three of us, authors of this report, have interviewed former North Koreans. We've looked at the working conditions. We've all been moved by the stories of these former workers. There's one particular story that moved me. There's this fellow who wanted to be dispatched overseas to purchase a color TV for his family, and he ended up working in Russia for a few years, and then he was never able to return. Eventually, he ended up in South Korea, and he was separated from his North Korean family, his wife and kids, forever. And speaking of wife and kids, most North Korean workers dispatched overseas must check out their Songbun status, must check out. They have to be loyal. They have to have at least one, if not two kids left in North Korea, pretty much as hostages. There's this other rather terrifying story that I remember talking to a fellow who was part of a logging team in Russia. He explained to us that there are lots of workplace fatalities, especially amongst the summit teams that go up the hill or the mountain to chop down trees, especially amongst truck drivers who have to drive in the winter on icy, very slippery surfaces. They don't repatriate the bodies right away. They keep them, and then they send them home all at once. He said that the most frightening sound in his life was to drive this truck, coffins on the truck, hearing the sound of water inside the coffins. These were basically thawing frozen bodies, human bodies. So we have heard a lot of frightening stories. We are, fully aware of the argument, and we'll discuss this amongst the three of us and with the audience, that perhaps continuing to allow these operations to continue might provide an opportunity for sharing information with these workers. But undoubtedly, the working conditions at these North Korean work sites overseas are absolutely appalling. And what's absolutely appalling is that 90%, 95%, 99% of their salaries are pretty much confiscated, taken away by the regime. Of course, if you're a North Korean, where the average industrial wage for an industrial worker is, perhaps $3 a month, it's a big deal to send, if you can, $100 to your family. Nevertheless, these are severe labor rights violations. Although North Korea is not a member of the International Labor Organization, the ILO, we did apply the ILO standard to this report. There's a set of recommendations that we included here because, of course, we're a human rights organization. Again, there are UN Security Council resolutions that ban the dispatch and hosting of North Korean workers. Nevertheless, even though some UN member states are in violation of these UN Security Council resolutions, we did include recommendations in this report for those countries going to the next year. Even if you continue to host these workers, this is what you should do. We will continue the conversation about this. So again, of course, South Korea had its own workers dispatched overseas to the Middle East, and South Korean nurses to Germany in the 1970s. But that was a capitalist economy that was capable to capitalize on the funds that they produced. North Korea is a very different story. And I'm very happy we have Hyunseung here to keep things in perspective. I am going to stop here and say that Raymond, you made absolutely invaluable contributions through the interviews you ran in Seoul and many other ways. I ran some interviews too. Again, in terms of labor rights and working conditions, we really need to expand on this. This is part of this report, but we can do much, much more. Hyunseung, you also made terrific contributions to your work on the chain of command and control, which is really the point of this project for now. Raymond, so you have met with former workers, you have met with former officials, North Korean officials, in charge of selecting, dispatching, and managing North Korean overseas workers. What are your views on the gravity of labor standard violations affecting these North Korean overseas workers?
Thank you, Greg, for the kind introduction and the opportunity to speak today. And thank you also to everyone in the audience for taking the time to join us, especially those of you dialing in from Korea. So to begin, I want to set the stage by defining what exactly we mean by labor standards, so that we have a benchmark against which to assess North Korea's compliance or failure to comply. The standard definition in the field would be the International Labor Organization's Fundamental Conventions, also known as the Core Conventions. As stated in the ILO's Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work, these conventions cover 5 areas. First, freedom of association and the effective recognition of the right to collective bargaining. Second, the elimination of all forms of forced or compulsory labor. Third, the effective abolition of child labor. Fourth, the elimination of discrimination in respect of employment and occupation. And finally, a safe and healthy working environment. As has been noted already, North Korea is not a member of the ILO. The latest UN General Assembly resolution on North Korean human rights, adopted in December of 2021, urged North Korea once again to become a member of the ILO and, quote, consider ratifying all the relevant conventions, in particular the core labor conventions of the ILO. That said, there are also other legal standards that we can turn to. The first is the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, or the ICESCR, which North Korea acceded to in 1981. Article 6 of this covenant addresses the right to work, and Article 7 addresses, quote, the right of everyone to the enjoyment of just and favorable conditions of work. To spell this out, this includes first, fair wages, second, safe and healthy working conditions, and third, rest, leisure, and paid holidays. And lastly, Article 8 of the ICESCR addresses the right to associate and to form unions. The second set of legal standards is North Korea's domestic labor laws. In addition to provisions in the Constitution, there are 3 laws in particular: the Socialist Labor Law, the Work Quota Law, and the Labor Protection Law. And we provide English translations of these laws in the annex to this report. Without going into too much detail, these 3 laws capture certain aspects of the ILO core conventions and relevant provisions in the ICESCR. It should be noted that these domestic laws do not specifically address North Korean workers who are sent overseas. That said, that is, they only apply to North Korean workers in North Korea. Nevertheless, we can reasonably expect the North Korean authorities to apply the spirit, if not the letter, of these laws to its overseas workers as well. As we will see later in the program, it should also be remembered that the dispatching of overseas workers is managed by the North Korean government at every stage. In this context, a spokesperson for North Korea's External Construction Guidance Bureau stated publicly in October 2015 that North Korea's overseas workers were working and living in conditions that, quote, satisfy the requirements of domestic and international laws. At the very least, the North Korean authorities cannot plead ignorance of the labor standards that they are obligated to observe with respect to their overseas workers. Now, having defined what we mean by labor standards, we are now in a position to evaluate how well they are met or not met with respect to the Overseas Workers Program. Our report focuses on North Korea's overseas workers in China and Russia. The bottom line is that we find in the report that the conditions at overseas work sites constitute forced labor. There are significant violations of the ILO core conventions. There may be differences in degree depending on the receiving country and the industry, but these differences seem to be circumstantial rather than intentional. And our report is consistent with previous investigations of the topic by other NGOs and think tanks. From the very first step, when individuals are selected to go abroad, there is systematic discrimination, which goes against ILO's core conventions. An individual's 성분 or socio-political classification plays a very important role. There is extensive vetting of all individuals at all levels of the party apparatus. Bribes also play an important role. One interviewee even said that candidates are essentially ranked by the amount of bribes that they have paid. Once they are abroad, overseas workers are not paid fairly for their work. According to a former worker who worked at construction sites in Russia, and I quote, "We are at the bottom of the rung, so we have no idea how much our daily pay is. And the money we get is like breadcrumbs. It's not even the price of cigarettes. We only receive that amount of money a month." The same worker said that workers began work around 7:30 to 8 a.m. and often worked until 3 or 4 a.m. the following day. Another former worker who transported logs in the Russian Far East said that living and working conditions were extremely dangerous. In his words, and I quote, "The beds we slept on were like coffins. They gave us a blanket that looked more like a rag. We couldn't survive the winter with it. Your feet get very cold, so you put gloves over them and wear pants and winter coats to sleep." He also said that several people would die in their sleep every year from the cold temperatures, which sometimes dropped below -60 degrees Celsius. Accidents appear to be common in certain sectors, such as logging and construction. A former construction worker said that a fellow worker was severely injured and needed immediate medical attention. Instead, the injured worker had to wait 10 days to be flown back to North Korea on a North Korean plane because medical treatment in Russia was deemed too expensive. And the worksite accidents were sometimes fatal, as was noted earlier. Finally, there is no freedom of association or collective bargaining. Overseas workers are closely monitored by agents from the Ministry of State Security while they are abroad. Under these circumstances, it is difficult to imagine any form of organized dissent. And before closing, I want to briefly comment on our findings on the situation of North Korean workers in China and Russia under COVID. As you might imagine, information is quite limited, but testimony from relatively recent escapees and also sources in China suggest that North Korea's overseas operations have continued during the pandemic. That said, border closures have prevented workers from returning to North Korea even after their company's contract had expired. China's so-called zero COVID policy and the resulting economic slowdown seems to have had repercussions as well. One source indicated that North Korean workers in China who found themselves out of work are being sold by brokers to local companies for a fee of 100 yuan per worker on short-term jobs. As an example, female North Korean workers who were originally sent to China before the pandemic to process seafood now find themselves shuttling between construction sites. In sum, COVID has made an extremely challenging situation for the overseas workers even more difficult. To end my remarks, I want to quote at length from a former overseas worker. He said, and I quote, "As a worker dispatched overseas, I didn't know much about human rights. I thought I just had to work that hard to earn money. But since coming to South Korea, I've come to realize that the workers there at the overseas work sites are like modern-day slaves. I wish the reality of that place could be exposed to the world." And I hope that this report marks a small but important step in that direction. Thank you.
Raymond, terrific work, and what a terrific presentation. Thank you very much. You highlighted so many key issues, including mens rea, the evil mind. Those North Korean officials do know what's going on. There is certainly accountability involved. And before I turn it over to Hyunseung Lee, who's going to address the issues pertaining to the chain of command and control, let me welcome our board members: Ambassador Robert King, former Special Envoy for Human Rights in North Korea, Dr. Marcus Noland, Vice President of the Peterson Institute. We have many former colleagues who have joined us, Amanda Morquedo, Chong Hyun Kang, and so many others. Eleanor Fernandez, I'll see you in Seoul very soon. I'll be leaving for Seoul tomorrow. So again, terrific to be together with so many friends and colleagues. And now let me turn it over to Hyunseung. Hyunseung, so this report is meant to highlight violations of human and labor rights, and it's also meant to highlight the chain of command and control. Understanding the chain of command and control is so critical to accountability. You have a PowerPoint presentation that you have prepared. I think that the share screen function is enabled, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you very much for having me, and it's always my pleasure to work with HRNK and you. And I think we have one very specific common goal: freedom and human rights in North Korea. I pretty appreciate for all of here to highlight North Korea's human rights and freedom. So, and I want to share PowerPoint I made explaining chain of command, how the process of dispatching overseas labors. So before we dive into the chain of command and control deploying workers overseas, I want to explain the most important thing of this process, which is the Kim Jong-un North Korean Supreme Leader's approval, which I call exclusive order. In Korean language, I would say 방침. So anyone who lived in North Korea would understand what 방침 means. It is absolute thing, and then it's the first step of any policy in North Korea. So the same thing, we have to get the permission from the leader. So I would say exclusive order, Supreme Leader's approval. And because due to the nature of North Korea's political structure, in which all power comes from one dictator, it is no exaggeration to say that all policies in the North begin with the written or verbal approval of the Supreme Leader and end with his decision. Without the line of policy approved by Kim Jong-un, the state or any project cannot move a step forward. So the 방침 system is very critical in North Korea's policy-making process. So even, for example, you are the prime minister in cabinet or like a director of any North Korean Workers' Party department, you cannot just make a policy and unless Kim Jong-un signed it or like verbally approved it, and you have to have evidence that Kim Jong-un approved this project or policy so that they can move forward. If there is no any kind of sign that Kim Jong-un approved that, and you will never start any project in North Korea. So basically, the companies and departments, they make a proposal to their superior offices, and the offices review the process and send it to the Kim Jong-un's office. And people may wonder how Kim Jong-un review everything and approve everything. I mean, any small like kind of this project, but Kim Jong-un actually do. I mean, due to the help of his assistant. Sometimes the Kim Jong-un's office just assigned and then approved it. Sometimes Kim Jong-un himself signed it. So I will explain more with the charts later how this Kim Jong-un's exclusive order works in the process. And let me shift. Before we do that, I also want to highlight what kind of industry North Korean workers are working for. So mainly North Korean labor workers are for the construction workers. They are mainly in Middle East, Russia, Mongolia, and African countries. They account for a big portion of labor experts. And second, big portion of labor experts are the textile workers. They are mainly in China and some other Southeast Asian countries as well. And IT workers are small number, but the amount they are making is, almost equivalent or more than construction and textile workers. And we can see many reports, the North Korean, art workers, and then the workers are making statue monuments in African countries, and then they are making tens of thousands of dollars of this, one or two projects. So I want to highlight this workers as well. And before the sanctions, the restaurant workers are, very well known to Western media and then the South Korea as well. And they are mostly in China, Southeast Asian countries. And we believe that they went back to North Korea, but they are still in China and Southeast Asian countries hiding their identities. They're still exploited by the regime and not just restaurant work. They are having other jobs like massage centers and like they are having different jobs as well. And in Russia, there are lots of logging workers under extreme conditions. And also, we have noticed that there are also farmers in Russia and some Europe countries who help, North Korean farmers. And we have marine product processing workers and daily necessity processing workers. And we have seen many reports that they are making furnitures and toys and the watches. So I put in the same category. Now I'm going to explain the chart of chain of command and control deploying workers overseas. As you can see here, just one man, Kim Jong-un, should approve every project, and there should be assignments from him. So I put here Cabinet, Office 39, and Munition Industries, Finance and Accounting Departments, Propaganda Agitation Department, and Ministry of People's Armed Force. We have more than that, but I just want to highlight these 6 organizations. And the reason I put in the 6 of them parallel because they are the independently getting approval from the leader. So I may explain how they get the approval from leader. And again, it's the first step to get North Korean workers out. So Cabinet, among these 6, Cabinet is the police organization to get the approval from Kim Jong-un. It's very complicated, and the Cabinet should have another process of getting approval from Workers' Party. So here, as you can see here, KWP is Workers' Party. So the organizations in Workers' Party, they are very powerful. They directly get the approval from the leader of North Korea. And also, due to the military first policy and the Ministry of People's Armed Force, the military side, they got many policy approval from the leader very easily. So, for example, General Reconnaissance General Bureau and then General Political Bureau, they are very independent organizations, but when they want this deploy workers overseas, they still go through Ministry of People's Armed Force. It's just process, but mostly the director of RGB and the director of political bureau, they get the direct approval from the leader. And as you can see here, cabinet, we have 4 ministries. There will be more, but I just want to highlight these 4 because in cabinet, they are the main ministries dispatching overseas workers. And as you all know, Office 39 has a immense power and lots of labor overseas workers. And you know, I want to highlight in these 3 organizations, but we have 7 or 8 more bureaus which is deploying overseas workers. And munition industry department, they recently got bigger, and they have Korea Computer Center under the department. The Korea Computer Center previously not under munition industry department, that they moved to munition industry department because of they are sending IT workers overseas. And 75 Bureau is recently assembled. And previously it was the other organization, but I guess they make another organization named 75 Bureau. They're also sending IT workers China and Southeast Asian countries. And Finance Accounting Department of North Korea Workers' Party mainly managing hotels in North Korea. So they send restaurant workers overseas. So which have name like Korea restaurant in like China or Southeast Asian countries, they are all from Finance Accounting Department. And one more, the department from the Korea Workers' Party and Propaganda and Agitation Department. So Manste Art Studio, which we all know, Manste Overseas Project, they are under Propaganda and Agitation Department. So they are making statues and monuments in African countries with the collaboration with the military side. So in military, we have another Korea People's Army Fine Arts Company, and they are also building monuments and statue and artwork in other countries. So basically they are doing same thing, but they have a separate entities between Propaganda Agitation Department and the General Political Bureau. And in this process, the Cadres Department, North Korea Workers' Party, is doing critical role because they are running the background check and then get approval from the leader separately of those individuals who will be dispatched the country. So if they reject those workers, and then those workers cannot go outside. And if they, once they get the approval from the leader separately, and then they will inform the foreign ministry to issue passports for those workers. And then those Kim Jong-un's function, the exclusive order will be delivered every department from this side, mainly entire North Korea Workers' Party. And the Ministry of Security will notify there is a policy and direction from the leader that their company can dispatch overseas workers. So they will send agents to the company for monitoring and control the overseas workers together. So that's the process how Ministry of State Security involved when people the workers are outside. And also another cabinet side I will explain later, but briefly speaking, cabinet must obtain the permission from the Finance and Planning Department of North Korea Workers' Party separately. That's why cabinet is tallest organization among these 6 organizations. And I want to move to explain the details. So here we have cabinet, and the reason I'm saying cabinet is weakest organization among 6 of them because there are 32 ministries under cabinet, but only a few ministries send workers overseas. For example, Ministry of Public Health sent doctors and nurses mainly to Middle East and Africa to earn hard currency. And the Ministry of Physical Culture and Sports has run restaurants and taekwondo training centers in Europe and Southeast Asia. And it's very rare case, but they send sports, players to Europe. The famous example is the former Juventus soccer player Hyunseung, and his salary was, extracted by the agent and then the Ministry of Physical Culture and Sports, and of course it's a violation, sanctions and human rights violations. And then third, like the Ministry of Post and Telecommunication sent IT workers to China to earn hard currency. They never sent any the workers to other countries, but recently they have an organization which is called National Information and Telecommunication Technology Bureau. I think the bureau was established in 2016 or 17. So Kim Jong-un want to emphasize information and telecommunication. So that's how they make money. And another one is big. The cabinet portion of labor expert is Ministry of External Economic Relations, but they are not directly sending laborers overseas. They are getting proposals from the province and cities. There's a trade bureaus every city and the province level. So they got the approval of a proposal, and then they reviewed and then went through the process. So let me explain the process of deploying the workers overseas briefly. So the proposal made by the Trade Department under ministry, every ministry has a trade department. So they make a proposal and then send it to the, their boss, the vice minister and the minister, and they reviewed it and send it to the, they send it to vice minister and the minister, and then also send it to financial planning department as well. They send both of them so that they get the approval from both sides. If one side denied it or rejected, and they cannot proceed any project. And once both sides approved it, and then they have to run by the cabinet superior office and then vice minister and the vice prime minister and the prime minister. And the prime minister or director of the financial planning department send the proposal to Kim Jong-un's office. And Kim Jong-un's office review it and approved it, and then send it back to the department or cabinet or the cadres department. And cadres department, once they got the approval, and they start choosing overseas labor workers from inside. And once they got all the list of workers, and then they have to run by cadres department. And cadres department will review all the background checks, and it may take about a year. So they run, and then they also report to Kim Jong-un's office all the workers are qualified to be deployed. And then Kim Jong-un will sign another direction approval. Once cadres department got the approval, they share this approval with the other departments. And from that point, foreign ministry will issue passports, and foreign ministry, summon the workers, and giving 2 weeks training. And also in the training, the Ministry of Security, State Security also involving. So they gave training that how you speak or act when you encounter foreign individuals, reporters. So that's the training they got for 2 weeks. And then yeah, that's mostly end of the process. And then it's about the time to send workers overseas. And of course, the security agents will be deployed together. So from that moment, the workers are like working on site. And I think that's all of process of deploying workers overseas in cabinet side. And I want to explain the Workers' Party side. The Workers' Party departments are relatively easy for them to get approval from the dictator because they are directly under dictator. So Workers' Party departments account for a very large portion of North Korea overseas workers exports, and especially the munition industry departments and sends out IT programmers overseas to make foreign currency. And then the finance accounting department operates restaurants and propaganda agitation department. They are making money through Mansudae overseas projects. And Office 39 accounts for the highest proportion of labor experts. Here we have almost 11 organizations under Office 39. So the first one, the large portion is the External Construction General Bureau. The Construction General Bureau used to be under cabinet, but after the Jang Sung-taek's execution and the organization the bureau moved to Office 39. They're mainly sending workers for construction and logging. And Daesung General Bureau, they dispatching textile workers and IT workers. Bonghwa General Bureau, they are dispatching textile workers, garment workers, and dairy products, right? And Kumgang General Bureau, they a few years ago they sent farmers in Russia. And Unha General Bureau, the bureau used to be under light industry under Kim Kyung-hee, and then after execution of all the light industry high-level officials, and then the Unha General Bureau was belonged to Office 39. They're mainly doing textile and then clothing process working. And Rungra, the spelling mistake, Rungra General Bureau, they are sending construction workers outside. And we also have other bureaus, but they are, the number of laborers they are sending are small, so just put the names on that. Daehung General Bureau, Gyeonghung General Bureau, Ragon General Bureau, Moran General Bureau, and Songbong General Bureau. So there are more bureaus under Office 39, but I just want to highlight these 11 organizations. And process, it's very simple. So for example, Unha General Bureau sent a proposal to Superior Office of Office 39, and then the Vice Director and first the Vice Director review, and the proposal will be sent to Kim Jong-un's office. Once they got the approval, and the same the process with cabinet, but it's very direct, and then it should be short when it comes to they got the function approval from the leader. And one more I want to explain about the military side, how military side get approval from the leader. So as you know, the North Korean military has taken many benefits in the nation's economy since the era of military first policy. Prior to sanctions, mineral resources trade was main items for military companies, but in terms of labor export, they mainly involve overseas statue and monument building and IT manpower dispatch. So Reconnaissance General Bureau sent a lot of IT workers to China and Southeast Asia. The IT workers normally conduct outsourcing business, but RGB IT workers are more responsible hacking missions from the Bureau. For your information, about 80% of IT workers are from Reconnaissance General Bureau and then Munition Industry Department. And I want to explain the process, and it is much easier for military to receive Kim Jong-un's approval for the overseas labor expert project than for the cabinet. It is a system in which departments propose overseas labor expert the Ministry of People's Armed Force, and then the military minister reports directly to Kim Jong-un and through the military department of Workers' Party. So there was involvement of military department of the Workers' Party, since every organization, even cabinet, military, are directed or guided by the Workers' Party. So Workers' Party are the main force of entire policy process in North Korea. And finally, we got here conclusion. So I want to highlight that as we seen in North Korea's chain of command and control deploying overseas workers, neither the Prime Minister nor the head of the departments at the Workers' Party nor the top military generals can dispatch overseas workers. It is only possible if there is a policy of approval of the supreme leader of North Korea. I think we must hold Kim Jong-un accountable for the human rights violations of North Korean overseas workers who are all denied freedom of choice of occupation, the right to be fairly paid, the right to work in safe conditions, the right not to be infringed on privacy, the right not to be forced to vote. So that's my presentation, and I'm sure we want to discuss more about it, and it's my pleasure to share my experience and then PPT with all of you. Thank you, Dave.
Hyunseung, that was terrific. Thank you very much. If you could please stop sharing your presentation, fantastic. This is a very clear view on the chain of command and control, a very clear view on accountability and responsibility. And hopefully this report will be a stepping stone in that process. You have mentioned several areas, of course, IT, restaurant workers, agriculture, construction, logging. Honestly, each and every one of these areas could be the basis for a very solid report. We actually already have the interviews and we can do more. So definitely this is an issue that needs to be explored further. Let me open it up to the audience. If you have questions, please place your question in the chat, raise your hand, place your question in the Q&A. Just let us know. We don't mean this to be a one-way discussion, a monologue. We do look forward to engaging the audience. If you don't have questions, I will have some, but okay. Let's see. So, all right, RFA, Sohejun, do you see it? Amid COVID, do you have an approximate number of how many workers are dispatched to which areas in China and Russia? Are North Korean workers dispatched abroad aware of the fact that they're violating international sanctions for working abroad? If the workers are not informed about this violation, is that also considered violating ILO? Other than to obtain the cost of living, are there any other motivations for the North Korean workers to go abroad for work? I do hope both of you see these questions. Let me take a crack at this. Yeah, there are other motivations for the North Korean workers to go abroad, even if 90% of their salaries are confiscated. If they're able to send $50, $100 back home, there's still a big deal. Also, being able to see the world outside North Korea is a big deal. And that's why these jobs are highly coveted, as both Hyunseung and Raymond mentioned. Bribes are paid, and workers try very hard to go overseas. Of course, once they're out there, they find themselves entrapped under very difficult conditions. Are they aware of the fact that they're violating international sanctions? No, in my view. I'll turn it over to you, Hyunseung and Raymond. But I think they just issued orders by their own authorities, by they're under multiple lines of command and control, as Hyunseung mentioned. There's a party line, there's a security agency line, there's a technical line. So, all they know is that they have to perform their jobs. How many workers are still dispatched to which areas in China and Russia? Well, you can still see that in the report. There are workers who are still, and please do read the report. There are workers who are still trapped in China and Russia under COVID conditions, under very difficult circumstances, and we do have numbers in the report. Hyunseung, over to you. Any additional comments?
Yeah, you made a clear point that the numbers of North Korean overseas workers are not declining or increasing because of the COVID lockdown or the lockdown. So since COVID, North Korea haven't sent any workers, but the workers outside haven't, went back because the North Korean government closed the border. They won't accept the people's back. The main reason is they are still generating money, and then for the regime, and it's a big portion of the money, and they know because of the UN sanctions and China and Russia, not easy to issue visa for them. So they just to keep them working there, and then lockdown is continuing. So they are taking advantage of the situation, and they're still exploiting Austrian laborers in China and Russia. And I assume that the numbers are over overall like over 50,000, but maybe more than that or less than that. So we don't have exact numbers, but that's approximate number, I guess. And then the North Korean workers are not well aware. They work in China and Russia of the violation of the UN Security Council resolution. And they might think that why we are sanctioned, because they believe that it's just the ordinary work for them, but they are not aware that their money, is taken by the regime, and then the money directly goes to the missile program. So that's the main problem for North Korean workers. They don't have concept or idea that they're exploited. So that's, I mentioned many times that that's why we should give workers direct deposit. And go ahead.
Thank
you, Hyunseung. Raymond, any additional comments?
I don't have a whole lot to add except to say for the first question, we don't have a very detailed picture, except to say that we know that the majority of North Korean workers in China and Russia are either in the Yanbian Korean Autonomous Region, which borders North Korea, and also the Russian Far East, which includes Vladivostok and the regions immediately north of that. And I believe that one member of the audience just noted that there are several hundreds of workers stuck in Russia due to COVID. And as we mentioned earlier in the report, we do note we have an estimate of 800 workers in Northeast China, but that may not be the entirety of the workers who remain in China.
Terrific. And it's an educated guess. That's Georgi Toloraya of the UN panel of experts who made that comment about the several hundred of workers stuck in Russia. Thank you, Georgi, for joining us today. Much appreciated. Of course, we included this in the report. Raymond and Hyunseung, North Korean workers dispatched to China have become victims of human trafficking under the COVID-19 pandemic. As you said, Raymond, there is the 800 North Korean workers in the Yanbian Korean Autonomous Prefecture, 400 in Hyunseung, another 400 in Longjing and Yanji. And these workers could not go back even after their contracts with local companies expired. And the economic difficulties created by COVID appear to have worsened their situation, and practically they became victims of human trafficking. Indeed, the practice of hosting officially dispatched North Korean workers appears to have continued in Russia. Even post UN Security Council Resolution 2397. We've interviewed North Korean escapees who talked about the dispatch of North Koreans to the self-proclaimed republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, which North Korea recognizes. We've heard reports that this may be a cover for the dispatch of military advisors. We haven't had the resources or time to look into this, quite frankly. I see questions from an anonymous attendee, and we're almost out of time here. Medical workers have been dispatched to African countries. Does the DPRK military involve in dispatching medical workers? We have documented the dispatch of medical workers through our interviews with North Korean escapees, which run way, way beyond just China and Russia. We've covered the Middle East, we've covered Africa. So that is a fact. Hyunseung, I don't know. Is the KPA involved in dispatching doctors and nurses?
I'm not sure, but in the past, especially my uni, they send the training coaches for military side, the Republic of Congo, and then some African countries training military people. And with them, there's some, medical service people, went together. So that's all I know about how military involved in medical workers.
Thank you for sharing that. I see a question from our terrific former colleague, Amanda Mortwet-O, who made her own great contributions to this report. Amanda's asking if we see any potential UN action, again, due to North Korean overseas and countries continuing to violate UN Security Council sanctions by hosting them. Would a seventh North Korean nuclear test potentially spur renewed debate about sanctions at the UN? Amanda, it's a critical question. As you know very well, UN Security Council sanctions have not been based on a human rights or labor rights rationale. They have been based on a political security military rationale. The exportation and hosting of North Korean workers has been banned because this is a source of revenue for the Kim family regime, used in turn to fuel the nuclear and missile program. Yesterday, again, they launched their 19th missile this year, but there's no human rights rationale there. We should really work very hard, we as civil society, on a paradigm shift to base North Korea action on a human rights rationale. That is absolutely necessary, and we and other organizations have thoroughly documented human rights violations happening inside the country and also being perpetrated against these workers who are dispatched overseas. Step one, start placing the North Korean human rights issue on the agenda of the UN Security Council. It was done in 2014, 15, 16, 17, never since. Georgi is with us today. Perhaps the UN panel of experts can look, if it's within its mandate, at these human rights violations and at the, quite frankly, the security human rights nexus. And I really think that moving forward, this is truly key, focusing on the political, military security and human rights nexus. The two issues are closely interrelated. We've been dealing with the North Korean conundrum for more than 30 years. Human rights has been sacrificed in the process. That is not the way. And this program, this report, the good and hard work that all of you have put into this, Raymond, Hyunseung, Amanda, and all of you who are participating and have worked on this report, is aimed to do that. Focus on the nexus, the human rights, political security, military nexus. So we're out of time. Let me thank all of the participants for joining us today. Once again, especially our board members and current and former HRNK staff members. Let me thank Hyunseung Lee and Raymond Ha for their good and hard work. It's been a true pleasure working with you. We are already in the process of publicizing the findings and recommendations of this report. This is an effort that will continue. And again, we have a lot of material that we can capitalize on and produce more reports, again, along the same lines. So again, thank you very much. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon. We're in very different time zones. Take good care, and thank you.